So you've got an older Subaru, or maybe you just bought one and it's finally happened. Your head gasket has failed. Or you're chasing for more power and you need some internal upgrades. Either way, you're ready to tear into that EJ engine.
This rabbit hole is deeper than you'd ever expect. Cheap Chinese timing kits that could fail when you least expect it.
Yeah, this is all China stuff. I would replace all this. The belt's good.
Brittle hoses that crumble in your hands and bolts that snap like twigs.
Well, this is everything you're not budgeting for when you're replacing your head gasket or upgrading your internals for more power. The hidden costs and some sneaky parts that you might not know that need to be replaced that should, or they could cost you thousands in the future.
I had to do all of this with my WRX. It was all done by Nolan, who runs Bolts Autosports here in Michigan. He has years of knowledge working on Subarus, and his shop focuses on track-oriented builds.
That thing sucks.
We worked tirelessly to get this car ready to rip again, and boy does she rip. So let's dive in. Kicking things off with the internet famous head gasket, the bane of Subaru owners and the reason why your engine is on the operating table. But here's the catch. Not all head gaskets are created equal. Sure, you could grab a bargain aftermarket gasket if you're into playing the game buy cheap, buy twice. To avoid pulling your engine again in a few thousand miles, stick to the tried and true options. Subaru OEM gaskets are going to be your best bet. Unless you're working specifically with a shop or tuner and you have a very particular goal in mind, there's nothing better than OEM. Subaru even makes it easy for you by offering a full OEM gasket kit, which includes everything you need to rebuild your engine. Well, almost everything. We'll get to that later. If you're still watching, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe.
At $315, the OEM kit is a solid investment. It will save you time and stress, which is worth every penny.
But you have the engine apart, so it's only wise to start upgrading some of the internal components. Stock head bolts might get the job done for a daily driver, but if you're chasing more power or even just long-term reliability, having something more beefy might be necessary. That's why ARP head studs are the ultimate solution. There's a big difference between head studs and bolts, as I've been told.
To go along with the head bolts, we all need
studs.
gaskets. Oh, fuck it.
ARP is hands down the go-to brand for studs. They have superior clamping force, higher tensile strength, and can be reused. Yes, ARP head studs are an investment costing around $200 to $500 depending on the type of head stud you go with.
But again, buy once, cry once. None of this will matter if your timing explodes, and well, this one might catch you off guard.
Your timing components syncs the rotation of the crankshaft and the camshaft, allowing the valves in the engine to open and close at the right time, and you don't want this to fail. For the longest time, gates used to be the go-to, but those days are behind us.
Nothing but the finest quality Chinesium from our friends over at Gates. Of course, you've got failing oil seals, leaking bearing grease, leaking tensioner, you name it. The shit sucks.
Sticking to a brand like Company 23 is going to get you the highest quality Japanese timing components. But if you thought that was the only concern with your timing system, you'd be wrong. As an older Subaru, you're likely still running the OEM cam gears. The issue with these cam gears is that they are made of plastic and could be over a decade old. Being old and going through hundreds of thousands of hot and cold cycles, they get brittle over time. And having one of these gears explode at potentially 7,000 RPMs will cause you a lot of pain and suffering. Thankfully, Roger Clark Motorsports does make a billet aluminum option. They're tougher, more reliable, and will last the life of the engine.
But that's not it. Your engine's out of the car, so you have access to a few parts that are likely ready to be replaced.
Subaru's OEM clutch forks are notorious for cracking, especially under the higher loads of a performance build, which, as any Subaru owner could attest to, they want more power out of their car. And even if you're staying stock, these parts don't age gracefully, especially if you're on it all the time.
There is two routes you can go here if you're staying within stock power levels or just above, like mine, which is at 350 wheel horsepower, which is the peak limit it could actually take right now. You're probably going to be okay with a stock OEM clutch fork. However, if you are chasing big power, you're going to want to go with something like the Subarus clutch fork, where it has been designed to take a beating.
Going back to decade-old components, Subaru boxer engines put a lot of heat through the engine bay, and over time, the rubber hoses turned brittle. When we were pulling apart my engine, almost all of the hoses were as stiff as volcanic rock. Coolant, vacuum, any line, you name it, they were ticking time bombs. These are parts that you can easily overlook. And surprisingly, for being rubber, these OEM hoses aren't cheap.
But it's a good idea to swap them all now while the engine is out. You do not want these to fail later, and everything's out, just do it now. Don't wait till later, don't do it, it's not worth it.
Whether you're doing the work yourself or bringing it to a shop, labor is one of the biggest expenses in a head gasket repair. The average time to pull and replace a head gasket on an EJ engine could be anywhere from 20 to 40 hours. Assuming a shop rate of 150 per hour, that could be anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000 just for labor alone. When you start to add up the parts included in the cost, it could easily be anywhere from $4,000 to $7,000 for a complete head gasket job. There's too many variables of things that could go wrong. As we found out, we broke plenty of bolts, needed plenty of parts, needed to wait for things. It just doesn't go the way you think it's gonna go. I was grateful enough for Nolan to let me come into the shop, work side by side with him, and learn everything and pick his brain, but because we filmed everything, it did take a significantly longer time. If you're tackling this yourself, expect to invest plenty of hours. If I was to do this by myself and not work with someone like Nolan, it would have taken me a much longer time because he pointed out so many small things and details that I could learn from. That still doesn't cover everything. With the engine having 115,000 miles, being detailed would have meant having the heads sent off for machining, which is even more added costs. Since you can't account for delays from the machine shop, that could easily add weeks to your project. With the age of this engine, we also could have checked and adjusted the valve clearances. But this is my track car, not a daily driver, so we opted not to do a full refresh and get this thing back on the track for testing and seat time. It's lived up to the test with 3 track days so far, plus I have a brand new Stage 1 OEM short block ready to be put in this car, so we're ripping this one.